Morning all. I'd like to show you one of my favourite British Grandmasters games here of John Nunn. I think it's one of John Nunn's best games books. It's a notable game on ChessGames.com. It was against John Fedorowicz in the very strong Netherlands tournament of 1991, Wijk or Hoogovens as it's called. Today it's Tatar Steel. Fantastic tournament this year, one of the best series of tournaments held in the Netherlands. The strongest. At this time in 1991, this was a category 14 tournament. John Nunn had actually won it the year before. He was the winner in 1990. So this is one of the series he did really well in. So was he going to repeat his success in 1991? Now John Fedorowicz, I think, had qualified for this A group section in 1990. He's listed as a winner of this tournament in 1990, and I think that might be the B group. So if you know the details on that, please feel free to correct me in the comments. So who is John Fedorowicz? He was a very strong grandmaster, is a very strong grandmaster rather. Got the IM title in 1978, the GM title in 1986. His list of achievements include first at the 1981 US Open, third at the 1984 US Championship, second at Hastings 1984 to 85, second at Dortmund 86, first at Cannes 1987, and the list goes on and on. So very strong grandmaster. In this tournament, his FIDE rating wasn't much different to John Nunn's. It was about 2555, and John Nunn's was 2600. And actually the rising star Adams was in this tournament, and he was also FIDE rated 2600 as well as John Nunn. But even higher rated players included Chernin 2610, Kalifman 2640, Valery Salov 2645. So there were a number of very strong grandmasters in this particular tournament. So let's have a look at this encounter. John Nunn playing white against Fedorowicz. So e4. John played the Sicilian Defense. Now John's theoretical knowledge is absolutely huge, as well as being a world problem-solving champion. He's also written a number of very well best-selling opening books, endgame books. So, and in the Sicilian Defense in particular, it's something which really he was an expert on, and he shows in this game what's known as the, I think, a Richter-Rauzer system. So after knight takes d4, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, he plays actually bishop g5, and this is very interesting. That sometimes the bishop can just retreat back, believe it or not, losing a tempo. But white's intention, queen d2 and castling queenside, it does provide annoyance for d6 often, because there's frontal pressure on d6, and that ping can be annoying for bishop takes f6 options. So black has to tread quite carefully with this system. We see black playing e6 and now queen d2. And now John plays a6 after castling queenside. Okay, I would be a little bit worried playing John Nunn as black here. I don't know about everyone on YouTube, but if you're playing against the theoretical expert in this kind of position, it might be a little bit of concern here. Obviously bishop e7 looks fairly tempting and natural in this position, just to play bishop e7. What surely can be wrong with bishop e7? Well, actually, we'll check it out in the second pass. In this position, black actually chooses h6. So he's investing another move, not developing his king side yet. King's still in the centre. The bishop now retreats to e3, and you might think, well, hold on a sec, isn't there a target knight g4 here in this particular position? Again, we'll check that out in the second pass. It might be ridiculous, knight g4. It'll be interesting to see what is actually played. Black actually played knight takes d4, allowing the bishop to come to d4. And that's interesting. A bishop on d4 means a battery construction with queen e3 is at some point maybe possible. This battery along this diagonal, alternatively, it is pointing at g7. Maybe a queen can come to g3 later. Any e5, of course, black's weakening the d5 square. does black really want to continue with, say, bishop e7? Doesn't it run into bishop takes f6? And again, we've got this frontal attack issue on d6 to factor in. Here actually black plays b5, so it looks as though it's taking some sort of liberties here, black, because he's moved this pawn, he's moved this pawn, this bishop's still at home, black king still in the center. What we see now is f4, and that might be a little surprising some of you, because surely you might think, well, hang on, isn't b4 on the cards? Well, trying to nab this pawn or at least put pressure on the center. We'll check that out in the second pass. Black was more cautious with bishop b7, and now the pawn is actually protected with just the queen, but it introduces this battery element here. So bishop b6 is now possible to attack the queen on d8. And in fact, black plays queen c7 here, and John Nunn actually uses this option, bishop b6. So you might be thinking, isn't this just pedantic? Why attack the queen just for the sake of attacking the queen? Well, clearly it's not for the sake of attacking the queen, and you know this because John Nunn played it. There must be a good reason if a 2600 GM plays bishop b6. It's not simply to attack the queen. There's some other aspects to it. And one aspect immediately, this rook's got the frontal pressure on the d file. So what can you do with this frontal pressure on the d file? And where is the black queen going to go anyway in this position? Does it really want to go to c6? Doesn't c6 look a little bit unfortunate to knight d5 in this position, with the queen here staring at the king? So ed is not possible without losing the queen. Isn't that a little bit dangerous to play queen c6? So that's another point. So the queen actually drops back to c8, and you might think, well, okay, if black did get some play later with b4 going, isn't this going to be a little bit dangerous for the white king? Okay, white proceeds with e5, and you might think, well, e5 weakens d5 a little bit. Can't black use the d5 square here? Or is it a little bit too dangerous? Well, we see here knight d5, and John takes on d5, bishop takes d5, and here it would seem quite tempting, perhaps, just to play, for example, rook takes d5 looks quite tempting, but does it actually achieve anything here? Because after e takes d, maybe queen e6 and maybe black's fine. It's something to check out again in the second pass. John actually played e takes d6, and so he's actually literally now threatening to win a piece with rook d5. He is giving black a move though to try and sort things out here. The king in the centre looks a little bit scary though. We see queen c6 protecting the bishop. And now in this position, actually, can you guess what white plays here? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Rook takes d5. Oh dear, what's going on here? Material versus quality versus time. Okay, a little bit of material investment. Queen takes d5 is forced. And here, okay, with a2 attacked, you might think, well, what is the big deal here? Doesn't this rook need to be on the d file, for example, and a2's hanging here? So what would you play in this position? Would you play a humble move like king b1, for example? Would you try d7? Would you play f5? Interesting, there are a number of possibilities, but what would you play in this position if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, John plays bishop e2. So he's offering a2 clearly. And there's some issues, of course, with the rook coming in quite quickly on the d file. Bishop d6 looks a little bit shaky. You could imagine bishop d6, rook d1. Say the queen goes here, then we've got bishop f3 as well. Ouch. So, John Fedorowicz took on a2. And now, another interesting move in this position is played here. what would be a very accurate move in your view? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, there are a number of tempting alternatives, it seems, involving a rook sack. You might have considered bishop f3, or maybe even rook d1, but it does allow checks. Well, check on a1. But actually, the move played was queen f3, putting the queen on that sensitive diagonal. And you might think, hold on a sec, isn't there like queen d5 here to parry that? That's something, you know, we really need to check out here. Queen d5, alternative defences, for example. But black actually chose bishop takes d6, which actually seems quite clever in many respects. White was offering the rook here. Now black is offering that rook here, with very dangerous implications potentially. If that rook and that rook is taken. But actually only the first rook is taken here. Check, because after king e7, in this position, if queen takes h8, then it seems to run into bishop f4 really, king d1 and getting mated, so that's to be avoided. John plays queen b7 check, and now we see king f8. Okay, so is this a dangerous position now, potentially for white? Because aren't there other possibilities on the cards here? After check, for example, bishop b4, etc. Well, in this position, this bishop is potentially a resource for black, but it's sort of neutralized now with this next move. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, John neutralizes that bishop with bishop c5, pinning it. Just pinning it and offering the rook still, but it's really dangerous for black. Okay, we see check, king d2 and the rook taken. And you might think, well, was the intention just taking for king g8? Actually an even stronger move here, much stronger. Can you spot this next move if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? And this is the final move of the game actually. Okay, John Nunn plays queen b8 check. Ouch. Using that pin, dragging the king back in the centre to be mated. Black had to resign here. If king e7, well, we'll check with an engine actually now, king e7, because it looks as though the king's got f6. So let's check the most precise way of finishing this game. It is a mate in 6. Apparently, so queen d6, queen e5, bishop d3, forcing f5, queen e6, and the black king's getting mated if it goes to h7 or h5. If it goes here, it's getting mated like this. Bishop f2. If it went to h7, then again it's getting mated like this. It's easy peasy. There's no defense. So let's have a look. Why did that go horrifically wrong for black in this opening? And by the way, John Nunn actually won again this tournament in 1991. So he did the double. He won it in 1990. And this is part of doing the double. This win in round 10 helped him win this tournament again. Amazing achievement for John Nunn to win this tournament. There were quite a few higher rated GMs. And John Fedorowicz wasn't a pushover. It's only like 50 points lower than him on the FIDE scale. So how did this opening have so much bite to it? Let's have a look again. So knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, and we see bishop g5. As a reference check, how popular is bishop g5? I assume it's one of the most popular moves in the position against this kind of classical approach where black's just developed both knights and just played d6. But Bishop G5, yes, according to my local database here, more than 10,000 games, 15,000 voting going up, like bidding in an auction, it's going up. Bishop G5, the value of Bishop G5 is going up and up. 23,895 last count for Bishop G5. Bishop C4, 14,000. So it's the most popular. Kasparov, Kramnik, Topalov, Fischer have all played Bishop G5 in this position. Okay, so let's proceed on from that, and let's go a few more moves then. So Queen D2 here is the intention. A6, castling. Now in this position, was H6 slightly unusual? That's one question here. Well, actually slightly more popular than H6 in this position is Bishop D7. 5,344 games. H6 is popular, 4180. Kasparov has played Bishop D7 in this position, as well as Ivanchuk and Morozevich. On H6, Kramnik, Karpov, Anand, Ivanchuk have played it. So it's actually quite different exponents, actually, for H6 in this position, which might reflect a stylistic difference of approach to play H6. That's very interesting. And then it falls off dramatically. Bishop E7, you might think it's a logical move. It's not. It's not well trodden. It's 456 games for Bishop E7. So actually the two top moves, Bishop D7 and H6, are the two top moves. So H6 and the bishop retreats to E3. And is the venom of that so much? Well, actually Bishop E3 is the most popular, 2,409. Bishop F4, 1,098. And now here one question was about Knight G4. Has actually Knight G4 been played before? It has, 68 games, but the top move is just getting on with development actually. Bishop E7 here, over 1,100 games. Bishop D7, 656. Knight takes D4, 351. Queen C7, 219. So actually just getting on development, but this next move that was played okay, is the third most popular. Knight takes D4. We see Bishop takes D4. And now here B5 is the most popular. Kramnik, Salov, Ivanchuk have all played this before, so it's all well-trodden territory still. F4, 73 games. F3 is actually a bit more popular, 122. And we see Bishop B7. Slightly more popular Bishop E7. Salov, Hubner, Yemlisky have all played Bishop E7 here. Bishop B7 has been played by other US grandmasters. Golko and Christiansen have also played Bishop B7 here. So it was popular with US GMs, it seems, this Bishop B7. 24 games here. So we see this move Queen E3. Slightly more usual Bishop F6. 9 games. Benjamin has played Bishop F6. But Queen E3, 8 games. Okay, so we're coming off the tracks a little bit now through sheer depth. Queen C7 played 3 games. Bishop E7 was 4 games. Delugi has played in this position Bishop E7 before, for example. So Queen C7, and now we're just down to about 3 games for the whole thing now. 2 Nunn games have followed Bishop B6 here. And Nunn also played Lobron in 1991, winning with Bishop B6 in this position as well. So Bishop B6 seems to be quite a nuisance indeed. Lobron was 2545 in 1991. So Bishop B6. And the engine is not really mentioning it. It's mentioning Bishop F6. Bishop B6. Okay, so first point. Queen C6, is that actually playable, or does it just fall into Knight D5? Knight D5 is a reasonable move here. It might not be absolutely crushing. Let's say black plays Rook C8. Just incurring some structural damage might be good, and then Bishop D3 to avoid getting mated on C2. This position looks pretty pleasant for white. And if Bishop E7, there's only more bites, but Knight C7 is threatened, isn't it? Knight C7 with a big advantage for white. So rook c8 is not only about c2, it's about defending against knight c7 there. So an interesting system. We see queen c8. The engine prefers queen b8 at this depth. Now queen c8 seems actually to increase white's technical advantage to e5. And now black seems, from an engine point of view, to have to play b4 here. It seems slightly risky where the king is on e8 in this position to play knight d5. It looks as though it's asking for a rook sack on d5. Was it so obviously refuted though? On the move b4, that's also interesting. Maybe black should have just done b4. We have this sort of position. Okay, b3. And here rook d3 might be good to try and just pick up that pawn and use the c file. Taking time over it. And this is pleasant for white. This kind of thing, it seems. White finally take if he wants on c3 anyway. It's pleasant for white. Okay, so in the game we saw maybe a slightly more dodgy knight d5. So the immediate thing that comes to mind, why not after taking here, why not just rook takes d5? From an engine point of view, the engine's very excited about John Nunn's move ed6. So why is it much more effective than rook d5? If rook takes d5, apparently it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing here. E takes check. We have queen e6. Forget king d7, they're going to get slaughtered. g3, for example. Queen e6. And here there's nothing. I mean, white hasn't got these pieces. This looks like a dead position for white. Look at the dynamism of the game compared to this position. And if black's going to have time to castle, then it's all over, isn't it, for the attack? Bishop takes b5, trying to keep pressure on the centre. King f8. And again, black's escaped. I believe black's mostly escaped the torture on the e file. Okay, so in the game we saw much more powerful e takes d6. So black can't even play bishop takes d6 without losing a piece. So he protects d5. And positionally here, if black's able to play bishop takes d6, he's laughing. He can castle and start laughing about his position. He's got a nice grip on the light squares, on nice piece on d5. It has to be eliminated. It's one of the pride pieces of black's position. Surely it has to be eliminated, and it is eliminated, and that is an engine-liked move. Now this sequence, how accurate is it from John Nunn? If he protected his pawn, again black's just escaping. Surely it's nothing. Or even worse, queen d1 check. Whoops! No, you can't even play king b1. There's not too many options basically here. Bishop e2 is the strongest, it seems. Now in this position, if taking this pawn, if we take with the queen, where's the refutation? Rook d1. We've got an eye on d8 here. So say we play queen c6. Bishop f3 walks into that skewer. Okay, so it looks pretty bad, pardon me, this kind of position. On queen takes d6, rook d1. This position just looks gone. Queen takes a8, rook d8, and that bishop is justified here for the d8 square. Winning queen, it's pretty horrendous. So that's absolutely horrendous, it seems, for queen takes d6. For bishop takes d6, again, it looks as though black's just too fragile. Just taking here, and this doesn't look too hot. So what's going on here? White has two bishops for a rook, and actually after castling can play queen a3 to actually get rid of the queens, and this position should be pretty good. Controlling d8 still as well, annoyingly. So this is annoying. D8 control, d-file control, and the bishops can have a really good time here. So in this position, it's a pretty bad position to have with black. And where did black really go horrendously wrong? Just one move slightly out, and he seems to be in this state, whereas king's very vulnerable in the centre. Now this next move, how strong is it actually? If we'd played bishop f3 here instead of queen f3, queen f3 seems to be the engine really light move. There's also queen c3, but queen f3 slightly has the edge at the moment on this depth. Bishop f3, and believe it or not, black's doing absolutely fine. Black can just take. And what does white do here? If we take this rook, check, and taking here, and believe it or not, black seems to be fine from an engine point of view here. Absolutely equal, in fact. Queen d4, king e7. White's run out of attacking resources. Where's the oomph for the attack? Fire's gone out for the attack here. Surely it looks about equal visually. And black's the exchange up. Okay, so that's no good. Bishop f3 in this position requires good precision and engineered move here. Now queen c3 is also pretty dangerous. Let's have a look at queen c3. Just out of interest, we can play check here and take, and we transpose into something similar to the game maybe. Check here. Okay, rook f1. White's much better as well there. But okay, so queen f3 is a very powerful move, just to get onto that sensitive diagonal. But what of queen d5? Why wasn't that a resource? So actually there's the move rook d1 here, encouraging black to take. We've seen this popular expression on YouTube, to take is a mistake, and here it's forcing black to take on f3, which accelerates white's initiative again. Queen takes, and we can even slip in d7. Even more powerful than bishop takes f3 is d7. So after king e7, we can even slip in d8 check. This is the point. That d8 square is absolutely critical because that bishop, absolutely crushing. Ouch. So this is really brutal, that this move, queen f3, cannot be parried with queen d5. This whole diagonal is white to roam here. Of course, you know, and white would love to mate black here as well, with just queen c6 mating 1. So this is horrendous after queen f3, it seems. Queen f3, what does black do? If you played rook c8, now in this position d7 is a forced mate. So if we go king, well, we take the rook. If we, okay, king takes d7 check. King coming out to play is not usually good news. Black's just getting mated. No point in carrying on that. So in the game continuation after queen f3, we saw bishop takes d6, which again is just diabolical. Not taking the rook, as mentioned in the first pass, this is a mating free for white. If after bishop e3, okay, it just delays things, get mated. So no, we've got to carry on the checks here. Check, and then we see bishop c5. There's actually other moves like rook f1, queen a8 apparently, but bishop c5 is also strong. We see check, queen takes h1, letting white continue with queen b8 is the most powerful move, mating 7, and this is just a forced mate here anyway. After this, so I think black resigned around here in any case after queen b8. So a very impressive game from John Nunn, and very impressive that he wins this Netherlands tournament, one of the most prestigious tournaments the Netherlands has ever hosted, Tatar Stil, twice. So not just in 1990 but in 1991, and this is just such a crushing win. And if you look at it, you might think, how did John Nunn really make it look so easy to beat the Sicilian Defense? But there was some very precise moves in there, as well as the rook takes d5, the timely rook d5, Very, very precise exploitation, which I hope to some extent has been demonstrated by the variations in this video. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.